What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So I want to talk about why I'm rooting for Cory Sandhagen this weekend. It might come as a surprise that I am, if you were to know, that I've never actually been like that big of a fan of Cory's. And I have come around quite a bit on Merab over the last couple of years. If you saw my GOAT list video, I had Merab at number 6. I think he is the best bantamweight of all time. And I appreciate greatness. Like, I do kind of want to just see him keep winning. And I do think he has a style and a combination of style and attributes that, honestly, in terms of fighting ability, might make him the pound for pound best fighter to ever live. Meaning, if you took any other great fighter, you could take John Jones, George St. Pierre, Volkanovski, whoever you like, I think in their prime versus Merab at the same size, I think Merab might just beat everyone. I'm not really sure we've seen a single person who has the combination of skills and attributes that can reliably beat Merab. And I appreciate that. If you watch my channel, I'm an action guy. I like exciting, violent fights. But I can appreciate greatness and ability as well. So I like Merab. And Sandhagen, he can be exciting. And, his knockout over Frankie Edgar is one of the most aesthetically pleasing knockouts in the history of the sport. But I don't know, he just never seemed like top shelf material to me. That's kind of how it's played out. He always comes up short when he fights top 3 or top 5 opponents. He loses to Sterling, gets absolutely blown out of the water. He loses a controversial but, very close decision to TJ Dillashaw. He loses to Peter Yan, pretty decisively. He loses to Umar pretty decisively. The guy just can't quite seem to put it together. His finishing ability is kind of lackluster. But I am rooting for him in this fight. And the reason is threefold. One, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, and he's kind of the jiu-jitsu guy in the matchup, so I appreciate that. He is a fun striker to watch. And I agree with what MMA Guru said, where, bantamweight used to be the division with the advanced, exciting, aesthetically pleasing strikers. The strikers with the crazy footwork and often with good knockouts and so on. Just look at the history of the champions. You're mostly seeing top shelf strikers. You're mostly seeing, you're seeing Dominic Cruz, you're seeing TJ Dillashaw, you're seeing Renan Barão, you're seeing Cody Garbrandt, you're seeing Peter Yan, Sean O'Malley. These are great strikers. These are fun champions to watch. This division has always been great because it was this combination of elite talent, because alongside featherweight and lightweight, it's, the most talent-stacked division. And you had very exciting, flashy champions. And that's just, the best of all worlds in a lot of ways. But with Aljamain Sterling and now with Merab Dvalishvili, and with those two champions happening during this sort of new era of Caucasus region wrestlers, it's had the effect of making bantamweight a lot less sexy than it used to be. And in that way, if Cory can win, it would be a bit of a return to form for the division. And that's cool and everything. But those two reasons, the jiu-jitsu, the flashy striking, those are kind of secondary to my main reason for rooting for him, which is he is the American in the fight. Okay? We have no American male champions right now, and that is a shame. And this sort of gets into the topic of when it does and doesn't make sense to just cheer for your countrymen in a fight. Because generally speaking, I don't. Generally speaking, I'm not too nationalistic when it comes to cheering for fighters. This is an individual sport, not a team sport. It's an international sport in the sense that, people from all around the world fight, but also in the traditions, in the arts that we use in this sport. They're from all around the world. They're from Brazil. They're from Japan. They're from Russia. They're from the United States. We're taking from all around the world. This is a sort of melting pot sport. And in that way, your nationality is not the main thing I'm looking at when I assess you as a fighter and whether or not I'm going to be a fan. I'm looking more at your fighting style, your personality, things like that. Nationality is, in most cases, sort of a last consideration. However, when we're in a situation like this where the U.S. has literally no male champions, We need to change that. Like, we need to turn that around. Like, I don't need it to go back to how it used to be, where it was like exclusively guys from the US and Brazil. I don't mind a bit of variety. I don't mind having some people from Western Europe, some people from the Caucasus, people from Africa, people from the oceanic regions, people from China, etc. Like, I like the variety, but to have no US champions, it's unacceptable. Okay, and I think that's okay to say. Like, I don't think that shouldn't be seen as like a prejudice thing to say, because I think it makes sense to want the place you're from to be successful. Like, look at it, within the U.S. Just look at it at the state level. I'm from Minnesota. We've got a pretty decent martial arts scene here. We always have. We've got a decent MMA scene. We're not top of the, we're not like top of the country. We're not like California or New York or New Mexico, but like, we're pretty good. We're pretty good, all things considered. But I would, and I like that, but I would also like it if it was even better. I would like it if Minnesota was like California. I would like it if the best gyms in the world were in Minnesota, because then I could train at the best gyms. My training partners would be training at the best gyms. Like, my whole inner circle would have access to the best training and would be more likely to be successful. Like, why wouldn't I want that? Why would I want my circle to be doing poorly instead of greatly? Doesn't make any sense. And if that's true at the state level, it should be true at the national level, because same thing. Like, if I want my state to be the best in the country, why would I want that country to be underperforming? Like, what's the point of being the best in a bad country? Like, I want my country to be representing well when they compete at the international level. I want to, like, if America just cleans house, like if America had all the championships, then that would mean training at like a middle of the road state like Minnesota would still be better than training at almost any other country in the world. And again, that's like good for me as a guy who trains, as a guy who does martial arts. Like, why wouldn't I want that? And again, like, it's to see this decline, to see us go from a point where we were holding a lion's share of the belts to where we're literally holding none, and where we have shockingly few contenders. Because just go through the divisions, like flyweight, like, who's the up and coming American? Who's even the American that Pantoja has fought for the title? It's Usyk, and he's like the along with Asakura, he's the worst of the bunch. At bantamweight, like, O'Malley has now lost twice. Umar is not American. Cory is our hopeful winner here. He's American. But, Peter Yan isn't American. Figueiredo isn't American. Look at featherweight. Volk is Australian. Lopez is not American. Murphy is not American. Pico is American, but just like what happened to him. Same at lightweight. Like, we've got Gaethje in the mix, I guess, but the champion is Ilya. Paddy is British. Saryukian is from wherever the hell he's from. Oliveira, Brazilian. At welterweight, like, same thing. Jack Della Maddalena is fighting Islam. Neither of those guys are American. Ian Gary is not American. Shavkat is not American. Sean Brady is. Hopefully he wins. But, like, middleweight, we've got Chimaev, not American. We've got Dricus, not American. Fluffy Hernandez, American, thankfully. But Imanov, not American. At light heavyweight, we've got Ankalaev, not American. Pereira, not American. Jiri, not American. Khalil Roundtree, American. Good. At heavyweight, we've got Tom Aspinall, not American. We've got Cyril Gane, not American. Like, it's really not looking good for America in the male divisions. And that needs to change. Like, the American fight camps, the American teams, the American fighters need to, like, get their fucking shit together and figure out what's going wrong, because this is looking bad. Like, this is like unacceptably bad. And I think it's okay to point that out. I think it's okay to say, like, look, we want our country to do well in this fucking sport we care about, in the sport that we train in. We used to be the best. What the fuck happened? We've got the advantages. Like, what advantages does Dagestan have over us? None. Like, it's pure application, that's causing them to win. And we can change that. So for these reasons, and especially since Merab kind of represents that wave, Merab is, he's not Dagestani, but he's Georgian, and he's representing that Caucasus region, like, wave of fighters. I am rooting for Cory Sandhagen to figure this shit out and find a way to beat him. Even though, sort of outside of their own conflict and outside of that bigger picture, like, title picture and contender picture in terms of nationality, I actually kind of like Merab more than I like Sandhagen. The cause is still the cause. Like, I need Sandhagen to win here. So, fingers crossed he's got an answer. Fingers crossed he has some ideas for how to fight hands, how to stop the takedowns, how to use his jiu-jitsu, how to attack the legs, how to mix in his strikes, like how to, knock it out pace. Just like, hopefully he's got something. Because again, as I said earlier, Merab is one of the hardest, like, matchups in the history of the sport. Like, again, I don't know that I would pick anyone to beat him ever in a pound for pound, like they're both the same size in their primes kind of fight. I don't know that I would pick anyone to win a majority of the time against him. So it's a tall order, but fingers crossed, Cory's got something for him. But we'll see.